can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, immorality generally.
How in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right, welcome back, everyone. 45 after the hour, and we're continuing our panel discussion. Marijuana is safer than Child Protective Services. Joining us for the discussion, we've got Serra Frank from Moms for Marijuana International, Mindi Griffiths from The Human Solution, and Billy Fisher from the Fight For Lilly Foundation. And we're going to turn the discussion now to a current case, Vicka and Jesse Thompson up in Bellingham, Washington, who, as I understand it, were part of a legal marijuana business, and that has invited the wrath of Child Protective Services. Mindi, can you give us an idea what they're going through as far as, losing their kid, what could happen, what's being threatened against them?
Yeah, actually I can. From personal experience as well. I had my own issue with CPS because of medical marijuana, and the feelings of your family being ripped apart just puts you in a panic mode that's unlike anything else. And what they're facing is the government telling them that they need, what kind of choices they need to make as parents. And we don't do that to people who choose to use Vicodin or who drink alcohol or coffee or take, any of those other things. And so it's scary. It's affecting their whole life.
I imagine some people out there listening must be thinking, wait a minute, Bellingham, Washington, not only is medical marijuana legal, recreational marijuana is legal. How is it legally possible for CPS to be doing this?
I don't know.
Let's ask Serra. Serra, what's going on with this?
It's up to their discretion as to decide whether they think there needs to be an investigation. It's up to the courts to determine whether CPS is got a case. So, it is my hope that today in Bellingham, a judge is going to determine that CPS is completely out of line.
Okay, so now, Serra, you've been studying this as well, and you alluded to in our previous segment about how CPS is basically making money on this deal. Lead us through that. How does taking kids away from marijuana-using parents lead to profit?
Well, it's called job security. Every single job and every single provider, including psychologists and drug specialists, judges, court clerks, all the social workers, guardian ad litem, and the CASA workers, they all get a paycheck every single week by continuing to throw people and children into the system. And what they have done with the medical marijuana law and how there is a protection in the Washington medical marijuana law, but the word that they're using is solely. And the law says that they cannot solely use cannabis to restrict a parent's rights. So what they do is they throw out a million other allegations along with it. That way it's not solely anymore, but they can use it. And that's kind of like their little loophole they've been using in Washington state to remove children from marijuana users. And then they also throw out, all sorts of other allegations, and there's always speculation. And what they hope is that nobody forces them to provide evidence of harm, because the law states that in order for a child to be removed from a home, there has to be substantial evidence of risk of harm or substantial evidence of already ongoing abuse. And what they're hoping is that the parents will just cooperate and sit down and do these meetings and just agree to do everything they say. That way they don't have to go to court. And even when they do go to court, they don't always present evidence. They just present allegations like they did in Billy's case, and the judge kind of just goes with it without any evidence, and that's where the appeals process comes into play. You have to make them be accountable for doing our criminal justice system the correct way with due process and evidence and witnesses, and that's a lot of where they get these parents is they don't know the system. They don't know how to navigate it or to fight it, and they don't know what their rights are.
Besides, keeping paychecks flowing to various CPS officials, is there other financial incentive? Are there grants or any sort of monies that are attached to quotas or anything like that?
Yes, thanks to President Bill Clinton in 1997, they passed the Adoption and Safe Families Act, which gives social workers a financial cash incentive to place children for adoption or to get children into services because they get more federal funding next year for it. So they're using our children as currency to receive federal funding. And they'll come into a house and not even with marijuana use. We know of another case right now where the mother decided to have her children at home with a midwife, and she decided against the doctor's recommendations of steroids for a rash that one of her infants had gotten, and CPS came in and took both of her twins as well as a 1-year-old child because of that, and then they had allegations that she was vegan and that was harming her children because she was breastfeeding, and they just grab onto anything they want, or they withhold evidence as they did in Billy's case, or they fabricate evidence as they do in many, many cases.
Keeping children safe.
And they do it for financial incentive.
Yeah, not only the financial incentive, but keeping children safe from the threat of vegan mother's breast milk. Come on now.
Right.
Seems a little ridiculous. Now,
we've had social workers contact us to let us know that they've been told by their own supervisors that they have to keep these children in these beds and they can't move them from the bed until they have another child lined up to take their place. And why was this? Because they have a yacht payment due. And they need that incentive that each of these teams get in Child Protective Services. They have teams of social workers and supervisors and public defenders and psychologists. And if they don't meet these quotas, then they don't get their quarterly incentive bonus.
It also would seem to me that if some of the incentive is built into successfully placing an adoption, then that perversely incentivizes taking kids from healthy homes, and the younger the better. You want to take a teenager out of a troubled home, we might be a handful and hard to adopt out, but an infant from a marijuana-using parent is probably a really easy adoption.
Exactly, and I have a great example of that. When Billy's daughter was taken, she was 6 months old. She was healthy, Caucasian little girl. I had a 10-year-old child living at home. They alleged that Billy was such an abusive drug addict that he was going to pick up his child and he was going to abuse her just because he got so stoned. But all the while, they allowed my child to stay in his care.
Wow.
My child is 10 years old, not adoptable, but a 6-month-old baby girl, she's adoptable.
That is shocking. We are talking with our distinguished panel here on Marijuana is Safer Than Child Protective Services. Mindi Griffiths from The Human Solution. You can find them at THSIN. Oh, I'm going to forget it. THS. What's the address, Mindy?
THSINTL.org.
I was right in the first place. THSINTL.org.
You were.
Billy Fisher from the Fight For Lilly Foundation. Serra Frank from Moms for Marijuana International. And if you guys want to stay on the line, we could take calls from our listeners in the next hour if you're available.
I'm available.
Yeah.
All right. Let's keep it going then. I also wanted to mention... Okay. Let's before I get off the medical marijuana states, we've got 23 states that have recognition of medical marijuana at some level. It seems to me as if the more early adopting Western medical marijuana states have fewer protections in their laws in this regard than do the newer Eastern medical marijuana states. Is that generally true? Does anyone have a handle on that info?
I would assume that it is true because a lot of times you learn from experience. So you have to experience these cases that are, being, that they don't have protection for in these early legal states, and the other states see that, and they learn from that other state, and they put in a protection. And I believe in Washington it took like 10 years to actually get a parental protection in place. And now we need to work on striking the word solely from it.
Yeah, even with the loophole, it took 10 years to get it in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mindy.
Hey, Russ, I have something to add to that. In Washington, they have been, updating their laws, but there's other things like if you get pulled over in your vehicle and you have cannabis in your vehicle and you have a child in your vehicle, CPS has to be called and the child is removed.
Wow.
Period.
Okay, so
you must have seen my picture.
The more laws that there are put on the books, the more people that are going to jail and losing their kids. It's passing laws isn't keeping people, giving them their freedom.
Well, it would seem to me that we need to pass some sort of law to recognize this right of cannabis-using parents to maintain their custody.
Yeah, exactly.
Billy, go ahead.
I wanted to add, I actually read a thing today that I think it was Normal Washington shared about how the spike in marijuana DUIs in Washington has increased like a lot. And what they're finding out is actually right in the law, in 502, it states that when the police officer pulls you over, he is required by law to call CPS and have your children taken right there on the spot, no questions asked. Like, it doesn't matter. They go to foster care for at least 2 days until there's a shelter care hearing. So, I mean, seriously, it's just a money game and everything that's going on here. And so these laws, they need the protection, and that's why we made Lily's Law, or we're coming up with Lily's Law, that protects these medical marijuana patients, or even just recreational parents. I mean, that's the whole thing. They've got to be able to prove that you're high and that you're putting your children in harm's way. And it's really hard.
It doesn't even matter if you're high. And that's what the judge said in Billy's case, is that, well, obviously he's high. Obviously he's using marijuana. But what matters is whether or not they have sufficient evidence of impairment and of abuse that is being caused or neglect that is being caused because of that impairment. And like in Vika and Jesse's case, or in Billy's case, they don't have that evidence because there's nothing that has occurred because of their impairment. And what they're doing with these laws where they just automatically take your child is they're assuming that marijuana is dangerous. So you having marijuana is dangerous because your child is there. And that's where they're just dead wrong. Marijuana, we all know, is not dangerous. And what is dangerous is throwing children into foster care, ripping them from their homes, and putting them in situations where they're 6 times more likely to be abused than if they were at home with a marijuana-consuming parent.
Yeah, those are some of the stats I've seen that regardless, even if we take marijuana out of the equation, removing a kid from their folks and putting them in foster care puts them at greater risk of lots of dangers. And so it should be a last resort. I don't think anybody here is against, CPS taking kids out of a dangerous, bad situation. I want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about here. But in the case of marijuana using parents, I think in many areas of law, just not parenting, but we have laws about alcohol, and we don't automatically assume a parent that has a glass of wine with dinner is a bad parent, a danger to their kids, and needs to have their kids removed from them. We don't automatically assume that somebody who drove home from having a couple beers at Applebee's, got their kid in the back seat, is necessarily a bad parent. So we're going to continue this discussion in our hour 2. Toker Talk Radio will put up our call-in line. If you'd like to make a call, a comment, or a question for our panel on marijuana is safer than CPS, please feel free to dial at 971-533-7111. We're on the line with Mindi Griffiths from the Human Solution, Billy Fisher from the Fight For Lilly Foundation, and Serra Frank from Moms for Marijuana International. It's all the time we got for hour 1, but stay tuned. Hour 2 is next. Toker Talk Radio. For everyone here at 420radio.org, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant